Joe, I appreciate it. This is episode, I said six of,
Six. Lucky number, bro.
yeah, the Your Platform podcast. I appreciate you coming on. Obviously, I know you from bowling and kind of just being in the community.
Yep.
So doing this I think, is special. I think what you guys do here at Community Speaks Out, it's invaluable.
Yep.
So what I'd like to do first, I'm going to introduce you. Um, but I have something I came across in my research about the actual crisis that's going on. I thought it was astounding. So, 20 million Americans age 12 and older have an addiction or substance use disorder. In 2023, the overdose death rate topped 112,000 in a 12-month period, which is the most in history.
Yep.
In the first time in history as well. And more than 4 out of 5 Americans who need treatment for drug use don't receive it. This is a public health crisis, and Community Speaks Out strives to bring awareness to this. So Joe Delacruz, President of
Now president, yeah.
President of
Yep.
Community Speaks Out. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. So the premise of my show is to bring organizations in, bring business people in, anyone who really wants to speak out and talk about their story, talk about their journey. You mind sharing a little bit how Community Speaks Out kind of started?
Absolutely. I want to thank you for doing what you're doing, because
Thank
I
you.
think we need more positivity. And positivity comes from people just sharing their stories, because there's somebody in some group doing something that's important too.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of us, and you're finding that out because you're interviewing all these people.
Yeah, absolutely.
But our group started because, unfortunately, I'm like most Americans. We don't pay attention to anything until it knocks on our own door and kicks a door in. For us, it was my son, Joey, who you knew.
Yeah.
Joey played baseball, and you looked up. I remember him looking up to you. You're one of the big guys. He's just a few years younger.
Yeah.
So Joey basically made it through school pretty much unscathed. A little bit of the drinking and alcohol and stuff like that, but it was after school when he found out his baseball career was pretty much ending in high school. He started dabbling with drugs. We got involved because I was in my basement one day, and like many Americans find out about addiction is through loss of property.
Right.
It's your loved ones are struggling. They're looking for something to get drugs. He stole a lot of my tools, and I remember calling my wife that day, and she had kind of like an inkling that something was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I called him and said, I think someone broke into my house, because I actually, Richie De Los Santos and all those guys. Yeah. So we share tools sometimes.
Sure.
And they had the combination to my garage,
Right.
and I just thought people were borrowing stuff. Lo and behold, when you see like 8, 9 different holes missing, you're like, okay, something's going on.
Yeah.
And that kind of launched us into finding this out. We got Joey the help that he needed. I was lucky we had insurance where we were able to put him off where you mentioned 80% of people don't have access to healthcare or any kind of services. That is changing a little. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff happening now. But Joey was one of the few that got to just his first time go away.
Wow.
And we got to go to learn about counseling and find out about the disease. So, we're talking 2014.
Wow. So 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
And basically we became alert to what was happening. And we wanted to find out everything we could. And we also were looking for support. So we ended up going to it was a church basement, 1.5 miles away from my house. And there was 75 people down there, 3 of my former players. And I walked in and I was floored. I was just like, why are we not helping? Right. And this is a point when they were saying, we were losing 40,000 people a year to overdose.
Wow.
And we thought that was an incredibly large number.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned 112,000. That's what it was last year. And it keeps climbing, and it's going to climb again this year.
Unfortunately.
We're on the path. So that's why we started our group. Mm-hmm. My whole family is based on, if you got something going on, if you're walking and you're carrying toilet paper behind you because you forgot that something stupid happened, we point it out.
Right.
We call it out.
Right.
And all the groups that we notice when we get involved with anonymous, if your son or somebody was addicted in your family and you said something at all these other meetings, then you might say, well, don't question him. Don't ask him why he did this or that. And I wanted to start a group, and Tammy wanted to start a group where people just said what was on their mind. Yeah. And it's not in a mean way. Right. It's so I can learn about addiction or learn how to get help.
Obviously, like I said, I've known you. I've heard about the work you've done. This is the first time I've actually dived into what you guys do.
Yep.
And I appreciate the fact that you guys are advocating for people to go out and speak. I actually had to go, I had to bypass the day to find the 2015 article about Joey
Yep.
and how he came out
Yep.
and, spoke in front of 200 student athletes.
Yeah.
And it takes a level of courage to do that. And I think what I've gathered from your guys' mission is that you guys are pushing people to, or encouraging and being a resource that people might not have
Yep.
to do that. So I appreciate that, and everyone has heard of someone close in their families,
Everyone.
and like you said, you had it at your front door.
Yep.
So um, it, it becomes more real when it's happening like that.
It's about breaking the stigma
Right.
anyway. And when it first happened too, I think what I noticed was that there's a stigma, but there's also the have and have nots, which
Right.
we know exist in our country and in every country around the
Sure.
world. But it was striking when I had one of my best friends. His son was going through the same thing. In fact, our kids were doing drugs together,
Yeah.
and I basically told him to go to this place.
Mhm.
I paid $500, and it was like a hospital. It was in the middle of Pennsylvania. Like, it was beautiful. We were getting counseling too, Tammy and I. So I was excited to tell him about it. And when he called me up and said, "Were you joking with me? Like, was this a joke, Joe?" And I said, "No, I paid $500. This is a guy that worked at L&M Hospital, had insurance through the hospital.
Mhm.
They wanted him to pay $30,000 for the month, and this is
Mhm.
back in 2015. That's when I realized there is a huge have and have not problem,
Mhm.
and really that's what we really wanted to. And a lot of it is people learn how to advocate for their own family. It's
Right.
like anything. Like you're in the insurance industry. You know that people that don't advocate for themselves end up with big bills,
Correct.
and the ones that call all the time and make sure that Paul's doing the right thing.
Correct.
So it's a lot of it's the same.
Yeah.
You got to advocate for yourself and for your family and make those calls.
What were some of the earlier goals that you guys set up? So you guys came up with, Community Speaks Out. What were some of the things you guys wanted to touch on and make sure like these things were addressed? Obviously, you want to bring awareness to,
Yep.
the drug abuse and addiction. But what are like give me maybe two or three that you guys really kind of thought of early on?
The very first one was stigma and trying to end that. And I think they still try to do that. I
Hmm.
think we're a lot further than we were just 10 years ago.
Hmm.
But it was almost surreal. And I had friends because Joey went on, I was on a town council. I announced it on
Yeah.
the town council. It's who I am. I
Right.
can't hold stuff in.
Right.
And I got called from one friend that said, "Hey, listen, my son's been going to this is his second rehab, a third rehab. This is a guy I worked with every day,
Hmm.
a guy that I saw regularly. I considered one of my best friends. We vacation together.
Yeah.
He was able to keep him and his wife were able to keep that a complete and utter secret. And this is not someone that I assume was shy or embarrassed and he doesn't carry himself that way. But that really led me and alerted me. And then when I did announce it at the council, one of my fellow councilmen was in recovery for a very, very long time, and he actually came up and said, this is kind of very, very private. You got to think of your son. He's going to have to get a job one day. He's going to have to go apply. If his name's in the paper, someone's going to Google him. And you know what? I said, I think that might have been the formula back in the 70s and
Hmm.
80s. But when you lose 45,000 people in a year, and they predicted the people when we were getting help at first, they said it's going to double, it's going to double, and it's going to double again, and they've been right
They've been
on track.
every single time, and it leads me to what my next point was, or not next point because it's not a point, but in 2021, so we go back just 3 years ago, 75% of drug overdose deaths happened to be because of opioids.
Yeah,
The age group out of those, there was 107,000 in that year. 71,000 was fentanyl, which that's another problem, right?
yeah,
That you got,
absolutely.
you get the opioids, but then you got the fentanyl
Yeah,
and the synthetic opioids out there. Um, but the deaths that were related out of those 71,000, the age group was between 25 and 34, 25,000. So you had more than a quarter percent, so 25% of those deaths from in an age group that is relative to me. When you hear those numbers,
oh,
what are some of the hardest things for families to deal with
yeah.
throughout this process?
Well, I think we always think of the person that died.
Hmm.
We think of these souls, 107,000, how horrible it's been. You multiply it by two, and that just equals the parents.
Mm.
You multiply it by sometimes two, three, and four. You have the siblings, then the aunts and uncles. That 107,000 affected probably a million people. Mom and dads, some of them can't work after.
Right.
They lost their kid, and there's not really much room for life for them
Sure.
anymore. The effects that it had, economically. So, I was an elected official,
Correct.
and that's why I thought I was able to bring some things in Hartford that to me, some people only are driven by budget
Hmm.
and listen. If you're someone in government, we need those guys.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we're spending our money properly. But when you put a number down of 107,000 Americans, and when say 30,000 of them were at the working age.
Mm.
So when we do our numbers in the government, we say, oh gosh, this kid's 18, we graduated him,
Right.
right? We really don't owe this kid anything else.
Right.
We paid his way through school. Now he's going to be in the workforce. He or she will work maybe till they're 62 years old. We have like 42 years of earning and paying taxes and being part of society.
Mm.
And the people we're losing, like, so we lost 1 million people basically since 99 or something. And we say now that we're short 3 million people to fill all the jobs. That's a direct result of, because it's not just 1 million
That's a
people
great
you
point.
lost, because
That's a great
these
point.
folks were going to have kids and
Correct.
they were going to have
Correct.
families, and who knows what the kids were going to be doing.
Mm.
And I think if you look at it as an economic driver, and it sounds disgusting because, I have people that think the kids are going to die.
Hmm.
And I'm talking about bringing other people in to vote and make sure that we're taking care and providing health care to people that need it. And when they hear me talk about budget, if your kid died, you really don't want to hear about budget.
Right.
You don't want to hear about those things.
Right.
But it's part of it because there's people that vote. And that's why I think it's important if you speak out. Sometimes someone's a elected official and it hasn't happened to their family
Right.
and they don't know anybody.
Right.
But if you're not saying anything, the people that vote for you, if they don't know that they're not affected.
Yeah. It's like you said. It's not obvious, or it's not apparent. It doesn't care until it's at your front door, and it's unfortunate. I want to talk about kind of some of the initiatives that you guys have.
Yep.
And you obviously, you guys' mission, you're striving to bring awareness to this. One of the things that I came across and I loved, and I was talking to somebody about it today, and he asked me immediately, how do I get one? Is the Narcan nasal sprays.
Yep.
Talk to me a little bit about that initiative and kind of, how that started and
Yep.
where it is today.
So Narcan's not new. What did change is how easy it is to
Hmm.
use. If you want one, it's right in the room with us. It's sitting
Yeah.
right over around the corner.
Yeah.
It's simple to use.
Mm.
And believe it or not, I think a lot of the stigma, because Tammy created an initiative that she open carries
Yeah.
because she carries Narcan.
Yeah.
It's hanging from her purse, and
Sure.
she's very proud of that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But she's gone to a bunch of different restaurants,
Mhm.
and it's it's been very positive.
Mhm.
But there's some restaurants that, oddly enough, the ones that don't want to carry it because they think that there's a stigma. If they see Narcan on the wall and it's hanging there, you're like, oh, your customer, this isn't the best place.
Right.
But in reality, this is one of the places that turned us down. And I won't name restaurants,
Mhm.
but wouldn't take it. They had an employee overdose in
Mhm.
the bathroom,
Mm.
and that is actually life saving medicine.
Yeah.
And what's hard for us is when we do an initiative like this. Obviously, people who aren't really educated
Sure.
will say things
Sure.
like, why save people?
Right.
This person did this to
Of
themselves.
course.
And you can say that about so many different diseases
Everything.
that we have in this country, starting with diabetes. If somebody needs insulin because
Right.
they ate a cupcake that they knew they shouldn't have,
Yeah.
what do we do? I mean, I'm allergic to hazelnuts.
Mhm.
I can make I can make an oopsie and eat hazelnuts, and all of a sudden I'm dying. It's like, well,
Yeah.
Joe ate hazelnuts. He should have checked it first.
Right.
And that's what makes everything harder.
Mhm.
And I think people, I hope, if you're listening to this and you're at work and you say, who cares? Let them die. Just remember, there's probably someone in that room that's like, it's a knife in their gut, and they're not gonna say nothing,
Yeah.
but they might be dealing with their kid,
Right.
or they lost a sister or
Right.
brother.
Right.
And so those people aren't going to stand up and say, you hurt my feelings. That doesn't usually happen like that.
Yeah.
I think it's up to the people that normally, and listen, I also, I want to qualify their opinions.
Sure.
A lot of people that are really mad, some of them have lost family members and
Correct.
brothers and sisters, and they're
Correct.
sick of it.
Mhm.
But you don't beat anything by just being mad at it.
Right. And that's the same thing kind of, it's funny that, just from an insurance standpoint, when I talk life insurance, right?
Yeah.
It's a very uncomfortable conversation to say, hey, what would happen to your family
Yep.
if you lost your life and they lost your income?
Yep.
That's a hard question to ask.
It is.
So to go into those conversations, and there's people who don't advocate for it. People don't, the same thing. They don't care about the life insurance. They don't think about that right now. But again, goes back to what you said. what happens if somebody knocks on your door? What are some of the other programs you guys got going on right now
Uh,
for, resources
well,
for?
it's funny. We've morphed. At first, it was end the stigma,
Mhm.
and we were really concentrating on that. And then we really found our niche because when we first got involved, we're sending these kids and our own son. We walk into these sober homes,
Mhm.
and I'm talking. I'd say just a short, even 10 years ago, it's not a place that you feel like you're going to get healthy. In
Sure.
fact, when you walk into a room that's not painted, the curtains are hanging off, and everyone in the whole block doesn't even want to walk by the house because it's disgusting looking. You have this overwhelming feeling that whatever disease I have, I did this to
Yeah,
myself.
yeah,
Because if you had stage 4 cancer, you'd be in a room at L&M,
right.
but you're an addict, so you're going to be in the worst part of whatever town USA,
Right.
in the worst building on the worst street. And we kind of changed that because I was able in Hartford with Chris Soto, and we first got up there. We really advocated to make sure that all these sober homes were getting registered.
Mhm.
And I can honestly tell you right now, one of the sober homes we deal with now, when two of them actually, when you walk in, it's almost like a little bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
Everything's painted, everything's nice. They're very, very strict with each other. So what we did, our initiative was people coming out of jail, keep people coming out of a rehab. We'll actually pay for the first 2 weeks
Wow.
for their housing. That can be between $400 or $500 depending on which house it is. But we have literally, and if I could tell you, my wife's on the phone. Like she left her job in
Mhm.
2018 because of everything that happened with me, and with our son, losing him. She couldn't go there anymore, but she really completely dedicated her whole entire life to this. And she's on the phone every day, and people like I can hear the desperation in their voice.
Yeah.
Like they already called all their friends and their family, and they have turned a corner, and they
Mhm.
and they feel good about themselves, but there's no resource.
Yeah.
And then here's Tammy, and she's not just going to hand you the money. She needs to hear your whole story because every story has a story when addiction. And to hear these people on the other side come in and then see them in recovery after 2 or 3 years, and like, I'll never forget when I needed something, you guys
Yeah.
did it. Or we bought them boots
Right.
for a job. Or we got him a job.
Right.
I was the job guy in the
Yeah.
beginning
Yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
construction. So
Right.
there's always a guy looking for a
Right.
guy, and I've
Right.
helped a few people.
That's awesome. You mentioned, being up in Hartford and
Yep.
kind of bringing stuff to the table there. Are you seeing like some impacts with, policy change because, with some of the stuff you brought up
Oh
to
yeah, I think
Hartford?
so. I,
Yeah.
I think the biggest one would be that first year
Mhm.
when we really went after the not after the sober houses.
Mhm.
We were more the carrot and stick approach.
Mhm.
You get moms and dads that show up at these places, or God forbid they lost their loved one
Sure.
at a sober home,
Yeah.
and they have a very, very bad reputation
Mhm.
because it's a house full of people with a disease, and when they lose someone, a lot of times it goes right to the sober home in the all the stigmas
Mhm.
that are attached. Like, it's a crappy place. They let people do all the drugs they want. And what I did find in addiction, I've never been addicted, but I do know this: when people are ready, it really doesn't matter what house they're in or how bad it is. I
Yeah.
mean, it's helpful to be in a good supportive house,
Right.
but when someone's hit the last line and they're like, I'm done. And what we're seeing is they're really playing off each other.
Yeah.
They hold each other accountable.
Mhm.
If you go there, we pay for the first 2 weeks.
Mhm.
The sober house calls Tammy, says, hey, the guy or girls hasn't gotten a job yet,
Yeah.
and they're gonna have to pay rent, and they know the hours are going away, and there's someone there that's willing to take them to work with them and
Mhm.
get them a job. So they're not doing it. So Tammy might call them and say, hey, what are you doing? We
Yeah.
helped you out. So it's getting pushed from all these different, but knowing that people care about you. It's not just this we can kick you out thing.
Yeah.
And so that's been a great initiative. I think I think our budget was last year, what we spent was almost $43,000
Okay.
paying for people
Yeah,
sober
that's huge.
living.
That's
It's a
huge.
huge amount of money for
Yeah.
us. We're you know
For
we're,
sure.
we raise a lot of our own money.
Yeah.
So
Um, I mentioned earlier that the overdose deaths in that age group of they're 25 to 24 to 35. Are you finding older demographics as well
oh
that
yeah,
coming in and seeking resources? Because I think when I was doing my research on just opioid addiction and just addiction in general, I think it was anywhere from like 7 to 8 years where someone is really fully recovered. But by definition, they're not really fully recovered because they live it day by day.
yep.
Do you guys find that you guys get the older demographics as well?
Oh yeah. Even just looking at those numbers, just purely alone at the numbers you brought in,
Mhm.
30%, that means 70% aren't those guys.
Right.
And we've seen it actually in the elderly a lot,
Mm.
especially going through COVID. There were people that were depressed, not
Sure.
going, you're not able to go to the senior center, stuff like that. So you could have got yourself caught up that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
It still is relative. I think it's a lot of it is back to the youth, the
Mm.
younger people, and being in these groups and meeting these kids. They were telling these kids when they first get involved to go buy a black dress or a black suit. And it sounds, when she first said it, I'm like, that's maybe she's being dramatic. And then she goes on to explain how she's been to 28 funerals. We do a lot of outreach,
Mhm.
and we have overdose awareness coming up in August, but we do a table on National Night Out.
Yeah.
And last year, a young lady came up and she's talking to me, and she just starts crying. And we're like, my wife goes and hugs her and everything. We said,
Mhm.
what's going on? She goes, I had someone, not just someone addicted, but she pulled out a picture from high school, and this was a group that she was with. About
Mhm.
10 people were in the picture, and it wasn't a baseball team. It was 10 random people. They were kind of friends, kind of not.
Yeah.
But she's looking at it, and 8 of them were gone,
Wow.
dead.
Wow.
And when I think of Joe Delacruz that graduated in 1989, I lost my best friend to cancer a year or two out of high school.
Mhm.
And then after Ed died, I think it might have been 10 years before I knew that another classmate died.
Yeah.
These kids are losing classmates. I'd rate that. And she felt
And they
like,
shouldn't be. They
oh, she
shouldn't be.
shouldn't. And she
Yeah.
had her drug issues. She wasn't addicted at the time, but she was feeling this overwhelming feeling like it's like I'm next. It's like
Right.
8 out of 10, 80% in a
Yeah.
random picture from a
Right.
random school,
God,
you know?
that's sad, man. Um, when you talk about the stigmas you mentioned earlier, how does that hinder an individual, you think? Like, in your opinion, in your experience with, recovering people who are recovering, what's like, how does it actually hinder them? What do you,
Yeah.
what are some things that you can put yourself in their shoes and you can say, hey, I understand how you feel.
Yeah. The biggest hindrance, I think, is when the family, like when you first get involved, most families don't tell anybody, right?
Hmm.
So all of a sudden you call your grandmom who lives out of state and say, I need $500, grandma. The fact that you didn't call your grandma, that your mom didn't call her to let her
Hmm.
know that you're having a problem, and that's where we see the big problem, because that's where the shame comes in.
Hmm.
Because you certainly would call your grandmother if if your son got a stage 4 cancer diagnosis,
Right.
or if it was diabetes and said, hey, your 8-year-old grandson's coming over, mom. He has diabetes. He cannot have a cupcake, mom. That's all communication. That's all allowed with every other disease. With the addiction, it just shows you right off the bat that you can't talk. We had one young kid that said, he loved his grandfather, and he felt like he had disappointed him, and he knew, but his grandfather didn't know.
Hmm.
And so his parents were like, my father's he loves him so much, we don't want to tell him. And then they said, you know what? Grandpa's going to die probably in a year. He
Hmm.
was sick. He says, just don't say nothing to him. It'll upset him too much. Um, Imagine that you feel like you need this drug to breathe,
Right.
right? It's a disease, and you're having your mom and dad say, "Don't tell Grandpa because he's gonna die. If he dies in a year, at least you don't have to put him through the pain of that." And it's like, what about the pain of me not being able to tell my grandfather that
Right.
I'm going through something?
Right. Right.
And we're still not past that, but
Yeah.
it's a huge roadblock.
It really is, and it just we as people lack communication for some reason, and I can't imagine. And again, this is on a broad statement. Wig,
Yeah,
I think for the most part, people can communicate, but there's a large part of people that lack the communication piece, and I can't imagine. I don't. You know, I've dealt with my own stuff
yep,
from other kind of things, whether it be anxiety and whatnot.
yep,
My family has dealt with depression, and fortunately enough, addiction doesn't run through my family. But it's hard to be emotional about some of these things because it requires a level of emotion
yeah,
to kind of just lay out and say, hey, listen, this is how I'm feeling. And I
yep.
wonder why. I'd love to kind of dive into that a little bit more. Obviously, that probably could be another conversation, but
To me, I think, you all of a sudden you have kids.
right, right.
So you understand now.
Correct. Oh,
There's a love and a feeling about your kid right now
oh
that
my God.
it's just, and for us. And I had a cousin that died of a drug overdose. I had an uncle that his whole entire life was mired in drugs. I drank a lot. I'd say alcoholic. I would say when I was younger, and I
Mhm,
still drink a lot now. Like
mhm.
when I'm at bowling or I'm doing my thing.
Sure.
So it's not like I didn't know what addiction was. Like
Right.
my cousin was 18 when he died of heroin
Mhm,
overdose.
mhm.
I didn't even go to his funeral back then. I'm like, he did that to
Yeah.
himself. And then when I look back, what changed me? It was this utter fear that Joey was going to die.
Mhm.
This feeling, this hurt, this, and then this is someone that, and I think we feel very responsible. And Joey's my stepson, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was with him since he was two,
Right,
right?
right. That's your son.
So it's
That's
my
your son.
son.
Yeah.
So he come bringing him up and playing baseball and doing all these things. I think we have dreams for our kids,
Of course.
that they'll probably never attain.
Right,
Right. I mean,
right.
we want our kids to be astronauts
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
baseball
Yeah,
players,
yeah. Of course,
professional at the same
everything.
time, right? Like
Everything.
in the off season,
That's
go to
right.
the moon and come back. And
That's that's right.
in realistically, and I wish that everyone could apply
Mhm,
that feeling, no matter what the case is,
mhm.
in their head, they could say, if that was my kid, how would I feel?
Yeah,
If my kid came out and told me he was
right,
gay, how would I deal with that?
right.
And you'd be surprised because I think the real true answer for some of the people that are the most against something, no
Mhm.
matter what the issue is,
Yeah,
if they can put their kid's face on it,
sure.
they're like, I'd find a way.
Right. 100%.
I'd find a way. And that's what
100%.
we all do. And I wish we could do that.
Can you share an example of breaking down stigmas in with Community Speaks Out? Like, you know, how do I come in?
Yep.
How would you, maybe I'm the one that has the stigma. How would you coach me to say, hey, listen, let's talk through this.
So we break stigma we have a monthly meeting
Hmm.
and we welcome anybody. It's the third Wednesday of every month. And usually it's breaking the stigma is normalizing it.
Correct.
Right. And it has to do with, and that could be anything, but
Sure.
with drug addiction, we have a woman that has literally struggled for the last year and a half trying to do it all on her own and came to our meeting the last 3 weeks or 3 months and all of a sudden is in a completely different position because she took a breath first because a lot of people feel better once they realize they're not in the boat alone.
Right.
And if people only knew, your next door neighbor's probably going through it. They're
Yeah.
just not saying. My best friend that I talked to you earlier, I had
Right.
no idea this guy was going through it,
Right.
and he was.
Right.
So a lot of times breaking the stigma to me is just talking about it.
Yeah.
But also breaking the stigma is when you do know about it
Yeah.
and you hear the person in the office, the guy or girl that says, I don't care, they're junkies, let them all die.
Yeah.
Just
Address it.
just that, and you don't have to be, even in Facebook,
Sure.
when someone says something that, because I've seen people say, "Oh my God, my cousin keeps saying this stuff about he doesn't care about drug addicts," and my cousin doesn't know, but my son's completely addicted. I'm worried he's going to die every day.
Hmm.
And I'm going to say, don't go on Facebook and scream and yell at him. It's your cousin. Call
Right.
him.
Right.
Pick up the phone and say, "Hey, you know
Right.
what? I'm going through exactly what you're being mad against,
Right.
and it's your nephew or it's your
Right.
cousin's. This is your cousin." And
Yeah.
then that's the only way you get through. You're not going to get through by throwing
Yeah.
stones.
I definitely think that's kind of what I was mentioning, like with the communication piece, we lack. I think social media hasn't helped us in that sense because of you can go behind a computer
You can.
and say whatever the hell you want, and it doesn't really humanize people.
No.
If anything, how many times I sent a text message that got misinterpreted because I didn't punctuate it the right way or whatever the case might be,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's just a smaller sample size of what we're seeing on social media, and it doesn't help at all. I think it's great how you kind of, you know, you guys want to bring awareness to the stigmas because I think that's where it starts. That's the foundation of it.
It is.
Because if you break me down to a point where I can see someone and look at them as the person and not as the addict, then that's where the big change comes. I think community collaboration plays a vital role in addressing addiction and promoting some of the changes. What are some of the partnerships that you guys have in place
Oh,
through Community Speaks Out to
well,
kind of help you
A
guys out?
Care, we have A Care and Recovery 12. Those are two sober home. They're businesses.
Mhm.
But we were just talking about this last night because one of those places, I think one of them, I'm not going to say the name of which one because I
Sure,
forget,
sure.
but has 450 people
Wow.
that are living under roofs that, to me, otherwise would be either on the street or on someone's couch or homeless
Right.
or because these are, it's kind of an affordable way to live,
Sure.
but it's also a very supportive way to live.
Right.
So that's one of the big things that are
Right.
changing. That's
Right.
who we collaborate with probably the most.
Right.
We are in the schools. Tammy, we had at Recovery Community Speaks Out came up with an idea for a play. Tammy actually was in her mind,
Very cool.
and we hired a playwright.
Nice.
We kind of framed the story. The playwright wrote it. It's going to be shown or played up in May
Awesome.
at Grosso Tech.
Nice.
The students. So we
That's
collaborated
cool.
with the students, and they actually have a group called Students for Recovery.
That's awesome.
And we have right now we have a youth group
Yeah,
right
yeah.
next door. We have a young teacher and somebody else. I say young, but your age,
Yeah, yeah.
a teacher and a counselor that work with youth right next door. They're on there. And what we don't realize, I
Mhm.
think when we say the 107,000, just to put this in perspective, when we do our tournament, we do which we is coming up. We're going to do in June,
The softball tournament.
softball
Yep.
tournament. So whatever age someone died at, if they were 24, their name in 24. So the
Wow,
parents,
yeah.
they get to, and
It's amazing.
this is where the impact, and this is why I've seen so much. So the parents are up there cheering, and the
Mhm.
friends that played high school ball uh, are playing ball, like Drew Rahili, or
Drew Rahaley, yeah.
yeah. So
Or
his
Raleigh, yeah.
Raleigh,
Yeah,
Raleigh, he played with Matty Green, and
yeah. They played with
so
me. I played with Drew. I
oh,
was wearing the same Legion team in high school too.
so they had the whole all those kids
Wow.
playing together.
Yeah.
So mom's cheering for him to win, and they won it, and
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
so
This is
it was a positive day. But it's I stopped the tournament about noon,
mhm.
and we actually let all the kids that are there that
Yeah,
day
yeah.
run the bases.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And there's a lot of kids that we, like I said, we talk about the 107,000 that are gone, and then the 214,000 parents.
What
What about these kids?
I don't mean to interrupt you, but it
Yep.
just shows how connected we actually are. It's very easy to look at someone and judge a book by its cover,
Yep.
and have these biases about some person because, oh, well, that person's smoking a cigarette, that person's having too much to drink. But when you get everybody in that community, there's a Bible verse, and this is more on a community level. But the Bible says when there's two or more in His name, He's there in the midst. I think that's the same thing when you have a bunch of people who are there to share the same purpose. I'm here because I lost a loved one.
Yep.
I'm here because I'm dealing with somebody. You get the same energy and there's no negativity, and I think that's beautiful that you guys do that.
Yeah. And there's so much more,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 for sure.
And it's funny because the longer we stick around, the longer we know where we can help.
Yeah,
And right now, we actually just started a building fund.
yeah, yeah,
$75,000 is in an account.
yeah.
We're going to start reaching out to businesses. We're hopeful that instead of renting a place like this,
Mhm.
that we do want to have a studio just like this where
Oh,
people
awesome.
can tell their
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
But and it's funny because we're collaborating with the people we deal with every day,
Mhm.
and we start asking questions about what do you want it to look like,
Yeah.
and a lot of times, and what we found, because we're actually we have karaoke on Friday night
Yeah, yeah,
sober.
yeah.
We paid for bowling for 80 people
Yeah.
last 2 weeks ago,
Sure.
and we do fishing trips,
Yeah,
sunset cruises,
yeah.
and because these folks that are fighting and trying to work through this find themselves mired in meetings,
Right,
even though the meetings help them
right.
every single day.
This gives them a different outlet,
It
right?
does, and
Outside of the meetings where
exactly.
they're with someone that's also like them. This also gives them something else to do where they might be able to find a new desire in
Yep.
in whether you said fishing, bowling,
But
golf, whatever the case might be.
at bowling, I'll tell you this much: with 80 people, we
Mhm.
usually get 90 sign up, 70 show up,
Sure.
and some people bowl, some people don't. But what we started realizing was these folks would show up,
Mhm.
and we talk. Well, there's a guy that's in recovery that's at my job, and he comes up and says, "Man, I saw like 3 guys. I thought they were dead."
Mhm.
He goes, When I first got in
Yeah.
recovery, we were in a house together, and then either he or I
Yeah.
like fell off, and we went to a different house. But I didn't know he was up in New Britain. He came back down to go bowling. I just thought he was dead because everyone thinks with social media, you see each other, right?
Sure.
When you're in the throes of addiction, you didn't have a phone when I met you.
Right, right.
Like
You did not.
and I was, my mind wasn't right. And I remember your name was Paul or it was John or something. And to have that physical connection and then to see like a 35-year-old man run into someone that's 25 that he knew 5 years ago and thought he died.
Mm.
Why would you think a 25-year-old kid would be dead?
Right.
So when they say that, it's powerful to me because I would never think that if I didn't see you around for a few years, I'm like, oh, I wonder if he died. No,
No.
it's the last thing on my mind. It's like,
Right.
it would be a shock.
Right.
And now the problem is in our country and in this world
We're
is
accepting that as
we're
normal.
not shocked.
Right.
And it should be shocking.
Definitely. I got a few minutes left, Joe. What advice do you have for other communities looking to address addiction?
Um, uh, Start with a group like ours. I hope one day what we're trying to do is we get the building and basically turn it into an Elks Club of recovery, where they can branch out, where we show them how it's economically feasible, how it's actually advantageous, where they can set up just like the Elks Club did.
Yeah.
And you have paying members and non-paying members, and whatever it is, you reach out, and at any time, any community can just step up and set up a meeting in the library, just like we started. Any parent that wants to share their story, That's the most powerful thing, and it's very powerful if you live in Colchester and your kid played baseball or soccer, girl or boy, and they're going through problems. Bring them to the school and have them talk.
What are some key steps that someone has to take to kind of get something like this running? Like what would it take to get?
Find passionate people. This
Mhm.
is one of those causes. I think just like cancer and these other ones, where people get affected the way they do. I've been obviously been affected pretty deeply. We've thrown everything into it. You can find people out there that want to turn their grief.
Mhm.
Hopefully, we find these folks before they lose their loved ones. But there's plenty of people who are in the middle of it with right direction will absolutely turn it into the juggernaut that your community needs.
Right. You you guys accomplished a lot. You've done a lot for the community. Like we go back just to the bowling, the softball games, and a lot in the memory of the what came to your doorstep and what you continuously to just be there in front of the community and make sure that you know what these are resources for everyone to have.
Yep.
What are some future goals? I know you mentioned the building.
Yep.
Anything else that you what is the ultimate goal of this, when you're 30, 40, 50 years down the road, when you outlive, uh, the
You know
average
what's
life?
funny is when we first got involved, because I'm a very optimistic guy,
Sure.
and when I saw those 75 people in that church that day,
Mhm.
I told those kids, I said, "Don't worry, the Calvary's coming,"
Yeah.
and I felt good saying it.
Mhm.
I walked out and I felt good, and didn't realize how big the mountain was. Although the Calvary is coming, this is a bigger problem and a bigger issue for our entire country. We're 5% of the world's population.
Right.
We use 75% of the world's illicit drugs.
Mhm.
We use 67% of every pill that's made on the planet, and we're
Wow.
only 5% of the planet.
Wow.
We have to dig down and find out what's wrong with us.
Yes.
And I think it's going to solve a lot of different problems. We'll make sure our families are healthy. And a lot of it is our access sometimes to everything,
Correct.
information, like the internet. And here's my optimism again. As bad as everyone says, the keyboard warriors are hurting people and they're
Mhm.
mean. I look at the internet, and if you really took and found an algorithm that just found all the positive news, I tell people,
For
make sure
sure.
you're looking at all these fundraisers, click on them, look at them,
Right. Right.
because they'll show you more
Because you'll
fundraisers,
get more correct.
and you'll see good stuff. When you start clicking on all bad stuff, you see all bad stuff. And the reality is, there's going to be one fatal car accident probably in southeastern Connecticut tonight somewhere,
Yeah.
but 80,000 people made it home safely.
Yeah.
We can't tell that story. We have to know it exists, because
Correct.
we can't tell the story of 80,000 people making it home safely. And
Right.
so we have to, and I understand why the tragic stories make the news. And there was a young man that lost his life that shouldn't have,
Sure.
in a car accident. And it's horrible.
Right.
But we have to stay grounded.
Right.
And that's very hard to do. Like, coming from someone that lost his son,
Mhm.
I understand how hard that is, and how easy it is to read into those stories and
Of
stay
course.
on them.
Of course.
But just to stay positive, and know that there's a lot of good happening.
Right. Joe, I appreciate this. This gives me some good insight into the organization.
Yep.
Obviously, I know you outside of, I just know you as Mr. 300.
Mr. 300.
Where can people find Community Speaks Out?
All right. So Community Speaks Out is easy. You just Google us. We're communityspeaksout.org. We're on Facebook. We actually have, I forgot to tell you that, Silence on the Streets. I'll give you this so you can post it up maybe.
Sure.
Silence on the Streets is basically a movie that was made locally,
Mhm.
Guard Theater, free tickets.
Nice.
It's going to be a great night out. The date's on there, April 13th at 7:30. That's something that you want to see.
Awesome.
And just keep looking us up. We have a lot of stuff coming up.
Very good. Keep doing the good work, Joe. I really appreciate your
All
time.
right. I'm
Thanks,
glad you
man.
do. Thanks.
Yeah,